Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling data visualization. And it's really more than just making things look pretty, especially if you're in design. It's a core skill really for understanding and communicating information.
Absolutely. It's kind of like a superpower for cutting through complexity.
Exactly. And for you, our listener, especially if you like getting knowledge quickly and having those sort of aha moments, data viz is just fantastic for that.
It really is a visual shortcut to getting it.
Yeah.
So our mission today basically is to unpack the fundamentals,
Right.
its purpose, the process, why it's so vital for, well, understanding the world. We're drawing on some lecture materials aimed at designers.
Right.
And we should probably start with this key idea that kept coming up, data. Any kind of data, it really needs visualization for us humans to truly grasp it. Machines, they're different.
Totally different.
But for us,
Mhm.
as one source put it quite strongly, data always needs visualization, period. It has to be visualized somehow.
Yeah, because the visual language, that's what
Yes.
clicks for us, right? That's what feels natural. So data needs that visual translation. Okay, let's dig in then. Why do we actually need to see data?
Well, the sources really point to two big things, analysis and communication.
Okay, analysis first.
Yeah. For analysis, I mean, just think about staring at a spreadsheet full of numbers. It's overwhelming.
Oh, definitely. Your eyes glaze over.
Exactly. Visualization lets you spot patterns, connections, outliers almost instantly. Things that are just, well, hidden in the raw numbers. One source said, like, you have numbers, you don't know the relationships, visualize it, bam, it's clearer much faster.
Right, it brings the shape of the data out.
Mhm.
Makes sense. And communication.
Well, once you've found something interesting through analysis, you usually need to share it,
Hmm.
right? You need to convince someone, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And visualization is just incredibly effective for that. For conveying information clearly, making a case. The sources touch on the difference between data viz and infographics, by the way. Data viz is more fundamental, really focused on accurately representing the data. Infographics might weave in more storytelling, design elements, that kind of thing. But, as a source pointed out, after analysis, you often visualize to persuade.
Okay, got it. So analyze first, then communicate visually. And the sources mention 3 stages: record, analyze, communicate. Let's start with record. What does that mean here? Not just hitting save, I assume.
No, not at all. Record here is about visually documenting, capturing information visually. Think way, way back. One source mentioned a map from, like, 6200 BC, possibly the oldest known map.
Wow, 6200 BC.
Yeah. And the point was, even that was a way of recording, visually recording what they understood about their world. A phenomenon.
So ancient maps are data viz, in a way.
In this record sense, absolutely. Other examples the lectures gave were Da Vinci's anatomical drawings, incredible visual records.
Right, capturing the human body visually.
And then, jumping forward, Edward Muybridge's photos of the galloping horse. Remember those?
Oh yeah, the motion studies.
Exactly. That was visual recording to answer a specific question, a bet actually, about whether all 4 hooves leave the ground at once.
And they do, right? The photos proved it.
They did. So visual recording solving a debate. That's the power.
Okay, that really clarifies the record stage. Now, analyze. How does visualization help us actually figure things out from the data?
So analyze is where you visually explore the data. You're looking for those patterns, trends, insights that aren't obvious. Florence Nightingale's Rose diagram is a classic example here.
Ah, yes, showing soldier mortality.
Exactly, and famously showing how death decreased dramatically as hygiene improved. The visualization made the impact undeniable. It communicated this trend, this change, so effectively.
A really powerful use of visual analysis. Any other standout examples?
John Snow's cholera map from 1854 London, super famous.
Right, the ghost map.
That's the one. By mapping where people were dying, Snow visually pinpointed the source, a contaminated water pump on Broad Street.
Just by looking at the dots on a map.
Pretty much. Seeing the cluster of deaths around that specific pump. Well, the conclusion was clear. The mat helped analyze the spread and led directly to removing the pump handle, stopping the outbreak. Visual analysis, saving lives.
Incredible. So analyze is about discovery through seeing, finding the story. Okay, final stage, communicate.
Right. Communicate is about presenting those insights you've discovered, often with a clear message or narrative in mind.
So less about discovery, more about telling.
Yeah, often. The lectures mention things like charts showing job losses under different presidents, or maybe visualizing an athlete's performance record over their career.
Okay, so highlighting specific trends or comparisons for an audience.
Exactly. You're using the visual to tell a specific story clearly and convincingly.
These stages make a lot of sense. Record, Analyze, communicate. Now, the sources also talked about humans versus computers with data.
Yeah, that's important. It's about playing to strengths. Humans, we're amazing at visual pattern recognition, spotting trends, outliers, shapes in data almost intuitively.
Seeing is believing, like you
Yeah.
said.
Right. Computers, on the other hand, are calculation powerhouses. They can crunch huge numbers, do complex math way faster than we ever could. Moravec's paradox touches on this. What's easy for us, like seeing, is hard for computers, and vice versa.
So the sweet spot is combining those strengths.
Precisely. Let computers do the heavy lifting, the processing, the calculations,
Hmm.
then visualize the results so our human brains can do what they do best, see the patterns, understand the meaning, draw insights.
Makes perfect sense. Okay, so building on that, what makes a visualization good? What are we aiming for?
Well, the sources listed a few key things. Good viz needs to be accessible, easy to grasp.
Okay.
It should leverage both computer power and human visual strengths, that synergy we just talked about.
Yeah.
Crucially, it needs to be insightful. It should actually reveal something meaningful about the data.
Not just look cool.
Definitely not just look cool.
Yeah.
And finally, it has to communicate effectively whatever message it's trying to convey.
Clear, insightful, leveraging both human and machine. Got it. And this is all becoming more important because there's just so much data now, right?
Oh, massively. The data explosion is real. That's why data literacy, including visualization skills, is becoming essential everywhere. Not just for analysts, but for designers, for managers, for, well, almost everyone.
Because data is the new raw material.
Pretty much. As one source put it, understanding and handling data is critical because this material is everywhere, it's growing, and it's only going to get more important. Visualization is how we make sense of it all.
This feeds into that idea of a knowledge revolution mentioned in the lecture.
Exactly. The idea is that data acts like compressed knowledge. All these records, this information, historically brought us to modern civilization, right? Now, that knowledge is being captured, compressed into data, and made way more accessible than ever before. Think about it like a Cambrian explosion, but for knowledge.
A knowledge explosion fueled by data.
Spot on.
Oh, yeah.
And that accessibility is revolutionary. The source basically argues this is a knowledge revolution, and right at the heart of it, data. It all comes back to data.
Which brings us neatly to Anscombe's quartet, a perfect example of why visualization is non-negotiable.
Oh, absolutely classic. You have 4 data sets. Statistically, they look almost identical, same mean, same variance, same correlation, pretty much.
So if you just saw the summary statistics,
You'd think, okay, these are basically the same, but then you plot them, you visualize them, and bam, 4 totally different patterns emerge. One's a nice line, one's a curve, one's got a crazy outlier.
it's striking.
It really is. The takeaway is crystal clear. Numbers alone can be deceiving. You have to visualize the data to truly understand its shape, its nature.
It really hammers home the point about our own cognitive limits with raw data.
Exactly. Our brains just aren't built to process rows and rows of numbers effectively. We hit a limit. Visualization helps us bypass that limit. It presents the information in a format our visual system can actually handle and make sense of. It's critical for understanding.
And this relates to chunking, which also came up.
Yeah, chunking is a cognitive trick our brains use. We break down complex information into smaller, manageable chunks. Think about phone numbers.
Right, we group the digits. 3, 3, 4, whatever.
Exactly. 9 digits straight is hard to remember. Chunking makes it easier. Good visualization often does this visually, using color, spacing, grouping to help us chunk the information and see the structure. It helps us overcome that cognitive limit.
So visualization leverages how our brains already work. Now, for designers listening, how do traditional design principles fit in?
Oh, hugely. The sources stress this. Data viz is design. Principles like use of color, shape, size, position their tile, they're fundamental. Knowing how to map different data types like categories, nominal, ordered steps, ordinal, or quantities onto these visual channels is key.
So using color for categories, maybe size for importance?
Things like that, exactly. Nominal, ordinal data, those are more qualitative. Quantitative data is numerical. The lectures talked about which visual encodings work best for each, and generally for quantitative data, position is king.
Position, like on a scatter plot or bar chart.
Yeah. Using location, like XY coordinates or the length of a bar, our eyes are really good at judging position and length accurately. So it's often the most effective channel.
Interesting. And like all design, it's iterative, right? You don't just nail it first time.
Definitely not. It's a process. Try something, see how it looks,
Yeah.
refine it, maybe try a different approach, get feedback, iteration, iteration, iteration.
Mhm.
That's design. You keep tweaking, converging, maybe diverging again until you get it right.
Makes sense. Now, ethics came up too, being truthful with data visuals.
Yes, very important. Edward Tufte's principles were mentioned, particularly graphical integrity, basically making sure the visual accurately represents the data without distortion.
Avoiding the lie factor, as he calls it.
Exactly. That's about ensuring the visual proportions match the numerical proportions. A common pitfall highlighted was 3D charts.
Oh yeah, those perspective distorting ones.
Those are the ones. They often have a high lie factor because the perspective makes it hard to compare values accurately. The advice was pretty blunt. Just don't use 3D charts for showing data.
Good advice. What about data-ink ratio?
Yeah. Maximize the data ink, minimize the chart junk. The idea is that most of the ink, or pixels, on your graphic should be showing actual data, not just decoration, grid lines, backgrounds, or other clutter.
So keep it clean and focused on the data itself.
Pretty much, if you have 100 pixels, maybe only 10 of them should be non-data elements, metaphorically speaking. Focus on clarity and the data's message.
But the sources also warn that all visualizations have some bias, right?
Absolutely. Every visualization emphasizes some things and hides others. That's inherent in choosing what to show and how. So all data can have biases, and all visualizations inevitably reflect choices that introduce some form of bias. Critical thinking is essential when looking at any chart.
Good point. We also need to think about how our own perception works, like with color. You mentioned the dress earlier.
Right. Our brains interpret color based on context, on assumptions about lighting. The key thing is our brain corrects the color based on the surroundings, sometimes overriding the actual color data hitting our eyes.
So the same color can look different depending on what's next to it.
Exactly. It's all about context and how our brain tries to make sense of the scene. This obviously impacts how we design with color in visualizations. We need to be aware of these perceptual effects. It's ultimately about attention and how we perceive things.
And Gestalt principles play a role too. Proximity, similarity.
Those principles describe how we naturally group things visually. If dots are close together, proximity, we see them as a group. If they share the same color, similarity, we group them. Understanding these helps create visuals that feel intuitive.
But our attention isn't perfect, is it? The gorilla experiment.
Ah, the invisible gorilla. Yeah, that highlights inattentional blindness. We can be so focused on one task, like counting basketball passes, that we completely miss something unexpected, even a gorilla walking through the scene.
Wow.
It shows we have limited attentional resources. We can't process every single detail, especially in complex visuals. Designers need to guide the viewer's attention.
Which maybe leads into interaction in modern viz. It helps guide attention or lets users explore.
Exactly. Interaction allows users to overcome some of those limitations. The lectures mentioned 5 key interaction types: selecting data points, sorting, filtering to narrow things down, navigating through views, and coordinating multiple link charts.
So you can drill down, explore relationships.
Right, it makes data exploration much deeper and more personalized. You're not just passively looking, you're actively engaging with the data.
Okay, and quickly, the process. It involves questions, data prep, design.
Yeah, the typical workflow. Start with a question, get your data, often involving a lot of cleaning or wrangling, design the visual encoding, map the data. And knowing what visualization types are even possible is crucial.
Tools are important too, like D3JS.
Absolutely. Knowing the tools available, like D3 data-driven documents, for web-based interactive viz is key. Understanding the available techniques is just as important as the design itself.
And finally, choosing the right scale, linear versus log.
Crucial, especially with wide-ranging data or exponential growth. A linear scale can sometimes hide important variations in smaller values if there are also very large values. A log scale compresses the high end and expands the low end.
So it lets you see percentage changes more clearly across different magnitudes.
Exactly. If you have data spanning orders of magnitude, like populations or, tech growth, a log scale might be much more revealing than a linear one. You need to know when to use it.
Okay. And the lectures pointed to examples of good and bad viz to learn from.
Yeah, always helpful. Looking at real examples and thinking, why does this work, or why is this confusing or misleading, is a great way to build intuition. The sources provided links encouraging that critical look.
Well, this has been incredibly useful. It really feels like we've unpacked the core of data visualization. It's definitely more than just charts. It's a way of thinking and seeing.
Absolutely. It's a fundamental skill now. Understanding the why, the how, the design principles, the perception side of things,
Yeah.
it equips you to move beyond just looking at data to actually reading it, understanding it, finding those insights.
So the final thought for you, our listener, now that you have a better handle on data visualization, how might this change the way you look at the information bombarding you every day? Think about the data in your own field, your own life. How could visualizing it differently unlock new understanding or tell a story you hadn't seen before?